my favourite hymn. I even know the words. In the tune. Well, this should be my last week here living in St Albans, and then I'm hopefully all set for Harpend then, all things being equal, next Monday the 24th. Still today, much cooler. I'm glad to say. I can cope with the heat, but boy. Especially at night. And it's been so humid as well. Ingoland, and the weather. It's what we always have something to talk about. Bother, excuse I. It's actually quite a recent hymn, I think. It was only in about 1900 and something. But I think it's eternal. Guide me, O thy great Jehovah. God is our boss, God is our guide, God is our teacher. My fingers found chapter 19 in the book of 1 Kings, and it's about poor old Elijah and how all the prophets were being killed. He's about 900 years before Christ. But I think he's provable again as an actual person who lived. And just, it's worth reading the whole chapter, but I'm not going to read the whole thing in. But this is the phrase that is so striking. Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. So this question of God speaking to Elijah as a gentle whisper, well, there's quite a well-known joke. I think it's a Jewish joke, but it could be anyone's, I suppose, but I'm pretty sure it's Jewish. And this poor fellow is bewailing his lot, and I don't know, God sends him help in one form or another, and he sort of says, oh, I don't want that. And he keeps rejecting the help that God sends him because he can't see that it is a help. That's the thrust of the meaning of the joke. So I think he ends up not allowing God to help him is what I'm driving at. So do we hear this small whisper of God speaking to us? Well, I've been at it for a while. I'm 63, I'm getting on very nearly 64 now, a couple of weeks' time. All things being equal, I can sing that old song then when I'm 64, can't I? Guide me, O thy great Jehovah. Well, I'm moving, so that's a big thing for me. I have this broken left leg, which plays up quite badly now, so I really am not physically able to live out anymore. I've lived out on a sort of pilgrimage around the world and here, there and everywhere, living out without money for quite a few winters now, over 10, 11 I think it is. I've been in as well sometimes, but my old body is physically just not capable of doing that. And of course with COVID-19 and so on, the hospitals are all backed off, and I don't think I'd want to go in, and it needs revision. The knee needs, the femoral process has slipped, so the femur is basically just slipping into there's a great big prosthesis in the left knee, total left knee replacement in the past, 11 years ago, and 10 actually. So that's my personal circumstance. Now, this place in Harpenden, it's just a little one-bed flat. The one bedroom will be my chapel. I'll live in the living room. And this happened that I went to view it last Thursday, and at a bus stop, I just stopped. I was early and got chatting to this little old lady. And she says, "Oh, where are you going?" I said, "Oh, And she says, "Oh, and what number?" I said, She says, "My mother used to live there." Now, isn't that beautiful? How did God take the time and effort to give me that huge, great big green light of all the little old ladies I could have met? I actually met someone whose mother used to live in the place where I'm going, the place to which I'm going. Now, I find that beautiful. So to me, that is definitely God giving me this great big green light saying, fine, go for it. So then I'll have a base in England. Now, I wrestled with this England thing for ages. Both my own father, who fought on the Somme for Royal Norfolk's King's Lynn, left England. He went out after the First World War and sort of ran the railways on the Gold Coast in Ghana. And then my grandfather, on my mother's side now, also trained at Guy's Hospital, London, from Stockport, Manchester, Lancashire. And he left England too. So I've thought about that long and hard, that those two men in my life both left this England, and why? And many occasion I leave England, have left England, and just thought, to this England. But particularly through the COVID thing. Actually, I was in Peru last year, and I'm most grateful I'm not there now. Quite frankly, I can't think of a country I'd rather be in with all this COVID going on, in spite of the fact they're making such an absolute shambolic pig's ear of the whole thing. Apparently, if we'd locked down just 1 week earlier, instead of 32,000 dead, it would have been 8,000 dead. They knew about this. They were wargaming in 2016. They had SARS in 2003. If they'd gone for a vaccine then, doing all the proper procedures, 2003, SARS is the same coronavirus family, and MERS was the other one. So they knew about these viruses ages ago, but it's not commercially viable for the big pharma companies, the big pharmaceuticals, to invest, because there's no, they want Viagra or something sexy that people will pay over the odds for. They don't want to invest in a drug which has got to have an absolute base price as far as possible, and available in hundreds of thousands of millions, actually, because it's a worldwide thing, this, and should be available to all countries, because if you don't stamp it out, it'll just re-emerge somewhere else. So for me, it's a big issue, this, that I also require medical, I have acute heart failure, so I require, I've tried taking myself off the blooming pills, and my heart zaps up to 150. I'll just have a heart attack if I don't take the blasted pills. So I'll be dead anyway. So I'm afraid that has taught me my lesson. I've tried taking myself off them. So again, I've got to have those pills. So I have to have a GP, I have to have a pharmacy periodically. Again, so I must be grateful for all of this medical attention that I am now in receipt thereof. So that's my ramble about my personal circumstances. As to the rest, I still find it difficult to understand. I can, sort of, because we're living in a godless generation. People do not want to hear what I have to say. And what I have to say is love God, love your neighbour as yourself. They just don't want to know here, in England specifically. But it's widespread in Europe now. Young people do not attend the big organized churches. So I've lived in Italy. The young people, by and large, move away from the big organized Roman Catholic Church, and I agree with them. They're hypocrites. They're the biggest hypocrites of all, the Roman Catholics. Like the Sadducees and Pharisees. They know the words, the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. Sorry, that's Jewish, but that's another story, actually. Jews for Jesus. But the mainstream Judaism doesn't even teach that Christ came at all yet. They're still waiting for him to come the first time round. That's a whole another story. My background's Church of England, and they're complete hypocrites. The Queen's the supreme governor of the Church of England, but she's also the head of the army, which is just absolute right from its foundation. Henry VIII, 1539, dissolution of the monasteries, 1662, the old prayer book and so on. It's absolutely false, the Church of England. But yet again, they say the words. They say, go forth in love and peace and, so on and so forth at the end of the standard communion service. Oh, and by the way, we've got a war to fight, kill for king and country. Or queen and country, actually, now, obviously. But king and country was the First World War. The war to end all wars, which didn't happen. So I'm afraid that organisation is utterly false. It's the reason I'm here in St Albans. I wasn't drawn to that. So I've looked long and hard at it. It's not as if I don't know anything about it. I can actually I could do a communion if you give me a crib sheet, and I could actually do a sung mass in the Roman Catholic tradition. I know the form. But that's irrelevant, I'm afraid. Just saying the words, saying the words and not practicing them, that's the problem. The whole point of Alban is so clear. He saw the light of Christ through Amphibolus, and he then he became a Christian, knowing his fate to say puff to the emperor, the Roman emperor of the day. I'm not going to kill anymore. So he knew what had happened to him. He'd been martyred, and he was. And he's venerated now. But why can't they see? I mean, I watched last year. It was actually 2 years ago now, I think. In fact, 2 years ago, I watched thousands upon thousands upon thousands of well-heeled, middle-class, older bunnies, male and female, trooping in at the cathedral. They did a big Sonne Lumia the weekend before, the back end of October, before November the 11th, Remembrance Day. It was the 100th year, so it was 2018, of course, 100th anniversary of the ending of the First World War, 2 years ago. We're still perpetuating this idea that when push comes to shove, killing is the right and proper thing to do. It's absurd. You cannot be a Christian and then go and kill someone. It is just an absolute contradiction in terms. And yet it's so difficult to, especially if you're talking to military types here in England, if their sons and daughters are out there fighting, dying in the various wars we're still dabbling with around the world. It is a complete, utter contradiction in terms. You cannot, if you truly have the love of God through Christ within you, you absolutely cannot kill and even harbor thoughts, ill thoughts of someone else. Why should God listen to you and listen to your requests, as it were, your prayers, when all the time you're planning and plotting to do the other fella in? I mean, that's obvious, surely. And they won't listen. So the passage I have here also from John. I love John. He's my favorite gospel. About spiritual blindness. Jesus said, "For judgment I have come into this world, so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind." Some Pharisees who were with him heard him say this and asked, "What, are we blind too?" Jesus said, "If you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains." Amen. That's the point. The two commandments say, love God, love your neighbour as yourself. Where in love is it that you can kill someone? How can that ever be the loving answer? Right. Ramble, ramble, ramble. No one listens. They don't want to listen. It's only Britain, England specifically, which perpetrates this utter balderdash, quite frankly. The royal family and the Prime Minister, all of them. Saturday was the 15th, August was the ending of the war in the Far East. Japan capitulated. We remember them. All those dead, all those young people, men mostly, dead. For what? The end does not justify the means. If your end is achieved by killing, we invented this firestorm. We bombed, I think, Hamburg. What's the other one? Begins with a D, doesn't it? Delft? No, it's not Delft. Last, I can't remember at the moment. But, we went this great big RAF, huge swathes of bombers went and bombed the absolute guts out of these towns in Germany, and sort of indiscriminate slaughter of innocent civilians is the point. And to sort of batter the Germans into submission. Go back a little bit, we, the Brits, England again, more or less reinvented the concentration camp out in South Africa. So we could hang on to the wealth of South Africa, we being England again. And then there's this whole slave thing, which is being opened up of late. Liverpool and Bristol, the two big ports and everyone bought into the sugar business. basically. Poor people, if you can see a good return on your money. I was listening to one of these nice, interesting Radio 4 analysis type programs. So just ordinary people bought tiny shares or whatever in these slave trading ships and stuff, because it was a good return, and it was absolutely treating the black slaves from West Africa basically worse than animals. That is in part what Europe was built on. I gather the Spaniards started it more in Brazil, actually. And then the English followed suit later. Brazil, 1600s, and then 1700s, we started doing it. And it took William Wilberforce 30 years to get slavery abolished in 1807. So essentially, our modern prosperity, never mind India, you use the labour out there, the jewel in the crown. Well, we sucked as much, England again, Britain, sucked as much out of India as we possibly could. No wonder they kicked us out. I am British. This is my heritage. My father's people go back, way back in Norfolk. And then my mother's people were Scottish and Lancashire. I am a Christian. I love God through Christ. No killing, no violence. Finito. Stop. Me too. Amen. I'm not even going to try and get up. If I sit like this for 5 minutes at the moment, my leg is just absolutely shattered. I've got to use crutches in the house. So anyway, there we are. Love is the answer. With the love of Christ within you, you just cannot but see this light. Amen.